This is the Bible Ranger, and we're continuing Evolution versus Creation, episode 90. How did the dinosaurs die off? Part 1. All right, I will give you the biblical event with a theory of what happened to the dinosaurs or the dragons with the fossils we have today, at least some of them. All right, the Bible is very clear that the earth was destroyed by the flood, okay, Noah's flood. Now, let's preface by saying this first, okay? We need to buy our children books that are more accurate of the drawings of what the ark may have looked like, okay? Not this kid one. I realize they're still children, but they grow up with that and that kind of sticks to their minds. But something like this at the bottom in the middle, it's more accurate, or the ones they have down here by Answers in Genesis. Those are pretty good. And that's their website there. They have real good books, so check them out. Dr. Walt Brown, he has a theory called the hydroplate theory, and we're going to use that and maybe add a little bit something more modern. But basically, it's what it says. In the pre-flood conditions before Noah, the earth was very heavy in landmass, and it probably looks something like this picture here, where you notice that mostly of it is land there and probably had very minor mountains, nothing like Mount Everest, which is 5.5 miles high, and it had seas versus oceans. And it had much vegetation. It was made to be inhabited. Okay, now the earth had subterranean waters. The Bible calls it the fountains of the deep. It's about, they estimate that half of the water that was under the earth is half now in the oceans. And they estimated it to be a half a mile thick, and it was 10 miles underneath the crust of the earth. And a canopy around the earth, as you can see here. The earth, the Bible says that there was waters above the firmament and below the firmament. This is how they get the waterways underneath. And we know we have water underneath, but we can't prove for a certainty that we have water above. So that's why it's a theory. And this canopy would make the earth subtropical. And we have some evidence, like if you go to the Antarctic, they found palm leaves. And you know that's not the tropic, that's not the place for palm leaves. And they've actually found fossils of camels in the Antarctic too. And in the old days, before the flood, there was a system. We can't prove for sure. We think it may not have rained, but we can't say that 100%. But there was a system God had established where the plants, there was a mist that would come out and would water the vegetation. All right, the earth was hit by a comet or comets or meteors, and not by accident. This was God's judgment because the earth had become totally corrupted. And if you want to know a little bit more about that, I have a series of the Nephilim, and that's pretty good. That's early on or mid on into my episodes. Now, it cracked the crust, and they estimate the cracking of this crust to go on 3 miles per second, encircling the earth in about 2 hours. Something like this picture here, kind of like a baseball seam. And the subterranean waters, the ones underneath, were under pressure, so much weight of the crust of 10 miles of the crust of the earth. And something happened to the water. The water beneath violently exploded supersonically into the air, about 20 miles upward. And in Genesis 7:11, I'll read midway through the verse, it says in the Bible, the same day, so the same day that they basically went into the ark, were all the fountains of the great deep, that would be subterranean, broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. Tremendous amount of rain coming down. And I'll continue this in a second. All right. Shooting water from the weight of the earth, now that it's cracked, is shooting up through the crack of this seam. And it's producing steam because of the speed and the friction. And it brought down the canopy that was above the earth. So that either it was made of ice crystals or whatever it was, it came down as frozen water. Okay, it made extreme rain, it made extreme winds, and freezing the water that came down into super cold crystals. And we have some evidence of that. If you see here, it's a famous picture of a frozen mammoth, totally preserved. The tree trunk right here fell off, right? But it's beautifully preserved, and it froze the mammoth standing up, okay, with food still in his mouth. I mean, he was eating. So he was having a good day, just enjoying. He looks like he's had a good meal, if you can see his picture. And they were just enjoying the meal, and they froze to death very suddenly. Something astronomical happened. The high pressure water eroded the sides of the crust, okay, like here. The top picture, as it's going up, the more it continues, this is made of dirt and crust and everything else, it's eroding it back and further back as we go on. As that happens, this crack here on both sides, sediment, mud is coming out of it through the waters and is washing on both directions. And this is the actual sedimentary rocks that formed later on, and they made billions of fossils. Continuing, this settlement trapped and buried billions of animals, making billions of fossils, and we have many fossil graveyards out there, just tons of them. The vegetation accumulated because the earth was so much vegetation. The vegetation, the evolutionists say that we don't have enough trees today to make all the oil that's been produced, and that's true. But the earth was different back then, and everything got bigger. It wasn't just the dinosaurs; everything grew larger. Later on, I'll show you dragonflies that were 50 inches, almost 3 feet across, in wingspan alone, and that's incredible. And everything grew large, and there was different conditions in the earth. So the vegetation accumulated in certain regions, and it made oil and it made coal, and they were formed. Now this can be duplicated in the lab in hours. So this is definitely scientific. We can do that. Now, as the crust widened, the earth below, called basalt, let me try to press the buttons here, basalt, no longer had the support on top, and it started moving upward. And as it moved upward, it still had lubrication of water on both sides because all of it had not escaped yet. And as that happened, the basalt started going up, forming mountain ridges. We have the mid-Atlantic ridges. That's how they got formed. And as it kept going up, the continents or the landmass on both sides started sliding away from the ridge itself. And they estimated to be about 45 miles an hour. That's a lot of land moving at a very fast pace. A lot of mass. And until they met resistance, it kept going. And then when it met resistance, the land compressed, it thickened, it buckled, it formed mountains on the opposite side of the ridges, and it formed depressed areas forming lakes. All right, the weak spots develop on lake. This is the United States. These are 4 states. You have Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. In Arizona there are the Grand Canyon, okay? So there was a lake that is now empty that Dr. Brown called it the Grand Lake. And there's some evidence to back that up. And there was another lake called the Hopi Lake, which are now empty. And there was a weak spot formed. If you notice, the Grand Lake butts to the Grand Canyon, and so does the Hopi Lake. But there was a weak form there, and it caused humongous gouges in it, forming the Grand Canyon. Not that little Colorado River that goes in there through millions of years. This happened within weeks or months or days. I don't know. Nobody was there. But through a violent means of a large amount of water. And this is a bigger picture if you were to see it. I mean, this lake goes all the way from Utah to Colorado. That's huge, and touches New Mexico. So that's huge. And I was reading that this Grand Lake has double the water of Lake Michigan. So that's a lot of water. All right. Now these are some fossil proofs of things that happened really sudden when the animals got fossilized from the sedimentary mud that was going around. Look at this fish. This is incredible. It's caught in the mid-act of eating its fish. If you ever seen those animal shows, these fishes swallow another fish in a split second. This in mid-action. This is beautiful. I love it. And this fish here was actually, or mammal, I don't know what it is, but it was giving birth. It was actually caught in mid-birth. And this fish at the bottom here, it had just eaten his meal not too long after. You can see the meal inside of it. These fishes are caught in a swimming formation. And this dinosaur here died in a classic suffocating position that goes with drowning, like in the flood. And we have literally tons of these clams here. Clams that die open up, but these clams are all closed. And you know how difficult it is to find two halves of a clam just in the ocean, walking to the beach. Well, these are all complete and they're all closed, and we literally have about 1 billion of those. Now, this was part one, and in part one here, that how the dinosaurs died before the flood. And part two, I'll show you how some dinosaurs were here after the flood and how they died off. So, and now evolution, I mean, it requires a lot of faith. It's actually practically a religion. And I'm not saying that for shock value. I mean, listen to the theory, the Big Bang Theory. Everything everything fit into something smaller than a period on a printed paper. This is what they say. Then it blew up and it made everything. Come on, man. How can you believe that? I mean, that's a lot of faith. While in the Bible, we can prove it through archaeology, we can prove it through prophetically, and we can prove it historically. We got things, I mean, things we can prove. They got nothing. They use microevolution as it's macro, and it's not. Anyway, so just like God saved, Noah and his family, he can save you too. That's why the Father sent his Son as a sacrifice to us, because we couldn't save ourselves. And Christ did it for us. Choose life. He says choose life so you can live. And you just gotta follow him. You gotta repent and live a life with purpose. Your works won't get you there. Christ did it all. But I mean, once you're there in the family, you gotta go to work, and you go to work for the kingdom. And by the way, thank you for the 100th subscriber. We actually made it to 100. And here is a picture of Noah preaching in the ark. It doesn't actually have this in the Bible where he's preaching to people in the ark, but you can surmise that it took decades to build the ark, and some of these people might be his employees, and he's saying, look, it's going to happen soon. And people going, yeah, right, I just work for you. You build an ark, you build this big ship in the middle of nowhere with no water. You're a crazy man, but you want to pay up. I'll do it. Anyway, and you can't blame them because it looks crazy. It really does. Well, thank you very much for your support and the thumbs up and for the descriptions. And this is the Bible Ranger. I'm keeping the Bible simple yet rich in content. Thank you.